Hello Dream Team, welcome along to GBR Reacts with our very good friends at Continental Tires. What an opening weekend it was of the summer series. Some belting test matches, some narrow ones too, and ultimately disappointment for the Northern Hemisphere. But we're going to get straight into it. All Blacks up by 1 over England. We're going to unpack the Celtic angle a little bit later on, but first and foremost, it's a very warm welcome to Tins, who's come appropriately dressed, all in black. Give us your opening thoughts on a narrow one. Plenty of promise, but ultimately probably a game that England could, should, and probably will regret not winning.
No, I think my immediate thought after when I was discussing with people who were at my cousin's wedding, so congratulations, Sarah and Tom.
Well done, Sarah and Tom.
When I was that they'd missed an opportunity. They will be kicking themselves today, I think. But at the same time, yes, I think we've talked about this for a long time with that. The All Blacks have lost that air of invincibility. That's gone now. So people go down there expecting to compete and expecting to win. And England did compete, and they competed very well. But at the same time, this is a fresh out the box New Zealand team, first game out in 7 months, new coach. So I think they're going to get better. And I think England didn't perform to, let's say, the standards that they did in the last 2 games of the Six Nations. I don't think they quite played at that level, but it was a good test match. It was entertaining to watch. People will talk about missed kicks and this and that, but I think there were other opportunities out there. And I think, you were saying that Stephen Jones has gone after Marcus Smith a little bit in the paper, but then there was lovely sublime bits of skill from Marcus Smith as well. He's hit the little double pumps to guys running great lines and putting people through gaps. Our offloading was down massively, which I think is an issue if you compare it to New Zealand. They had 3 times the amount of offloads that we did, but we're a team in transition. We competed, away from home against New Zealand. Now, I'm not saying that's good enough. We've got to go and they expect to win those games. And as I said, they'll be kicking themselves that they didn't win. But someone like Talea, how good is... I think they had 34... There was 34 missed tackles. I reckon he must have been 90% of them. But I enjoyed the game to watch. I thought it was a really good game. And, England will be ruining missed chances. And they could have gone down and got their first win in 20 years. But they've got next week. No one ever beats New Zealand at Eden Park, and hopefully we can go there and that'll be better. Getting the win and then getting at Eden Park would be better.
The last time the All Blacks lost at Eden Park, 1994 against France, and it's one of the great jibes that you can give to Sean Fitzpatrick, who is an absolute goat and walks into every single all-time great 15, but is still the last All Black captain to lose at Eden Park. Interesting what you're saying. So You were very vocal off the back of the loss to Scotland in the Six Nations. Said, I really enjoyed the way England tried to play. They then went and beat Ireland in the most dramatic circumstances. They then backed up with another good performance, albeit in a defeat to France. I think from memory, you were saying they've probably got a kind of a 12-month window now, England, where if the performances are where they need to be, the result isn't necessarily going to be the thing that everyone hangs their hat on. And that comes off the back of a World Cup where, of course, they made the semi-finals, but sort of playing anti-rugby. Where are the levels of goodwill at the moment for England? Another sort of 2019 loss next weekend at the end of a very, very long season. The crisis of training in May. It's been an absolute slog. Is that acceptable, or is that goodwill bank beginning to drop a little?
Yeah, I think if you look at it from that sense, if I speak as a player's perspective and having been there, it is a long season now and they're getting into it, but you are playing for your country, so you don't really have that excuse. But no one's going to be thinking along the same ways as you are in terms of what state your body's in, how you've been managed, but I think it wasn't the same level of performance as it was in the Six Nations. I think you could see the energy for the first time. In a white jersey, Tommy Freeman had a really quiet game. Didn't really go his way. That high pass at the start, that sort of halfway over his head. He just never, and that hasn't happened. He's always found a way of getting into the game. So there were little bits. I think, Sam on the Hill was great again defensively. I think England's defence is getting better and better, but it still is causing a few issues when they get it wrong. I got to give Henry Slade a massive shout out, because the way he's managed to adapt, he stopped a lot of threats yesterday. We still got to find a way of getting his hands on the ball more. Because I don't think he touched the ball as much as you want him to, but he actually defensively he did some great reads that stopped. The All Blacks found a way of pulling us on, our defenders on, and then late short lines with the Scott Barrett did one.
Dalton Papali'i did a couple as well.
Yeah, Papali'i went through, and they were just starting, and a few great reads from outside defenders sort of managed to save us a few times. But Felix Jones always said that it's going to take sort of 15 games, and they're probably halfway through that now, and they are getting better. I mean, the difference between Italy and their defence and what they're doing now, is chalk and cheese. So there is still always improvements going on, and I think it's one of those things, isn't it? England were dead and buried for so long, and then they have a good performance against Ireland. They have a good performance against France. Now it's like, Stephen Jones, you expect them to beat New Zealand in New Zealand, who were runners-up in the Rugby World Cup. It's just, it's the nature of sport. You have a few performances, and they expect you to take on the world every single time. I think if you put it on a performance level, England were below their last performance, just intensity-wise around attack, but there were some really nice bits in there as well. And I think, from a New Zealand point, first hit out the box, a bit rusty in stages, but were fresh. You could see their energy levels were possibly slightly higher than England's. But then saying that, England's defensive energy was massive. Some of the hits that they got, hitting people behind gain lines, good reads that they made to put real pressure on. And I think sometimes you can overlook it. I think it was a great test match that unfortunately didn't fall our way. At 15-10, you would have hoped that they might have seen out the game, but a slight bit of indiscipline came in, but that was also from pressure from New Zealand. So, you compare that to sort of the Wales game where they gave away so many penalties. I think it's going to be a frustrating one for both of us. I think he will be kicking himself, thinking we shouldn't be 1-0 up.
Yeah. Let's do positives. Itoje, big. Furbank looked really lively. Martin,
Cunningham South. Furbank was fantastic. I thought there were some really good bits of Smith in there, like just time on the ball, double pumping at the line, then putting people through. Earl was industrious. He just, he wasn't quite the dynamo that he has been, but he still works so hard. He brings so much of the energy that England is going through. Who else really jumped out?
George Martin does what he does.
Yeah, George Martin was around smashing people. I mean, I do agree with the commentators when they said we've got to get Faye Waboso on the ball as much as we can. You look at what they do with Talea and how he just takes it off a line out sometimes. I mean, when he has the ball, people talk about you need big men. Someone like Waboso punches so much higher than what his body weight is.
Yeah.
I mean, his strength is ridiculous. I mean, need to get him with hands on the ball more and more if possible. I thought Finn Baxter did all right when he came off the bench, to be fair. Obviously, there was a few issues around the scrum time and what their prop was doing in terms of sliding down the side, and sometimes it went our way, sometimes it didn't go our way.
Yeah.
But generally, I thought I didn't go, okay, we're back to square one. I think there was attempts to be attacking flares. Just we made a few errors in key areas. The breakdown was a strongly contested area, and that sort of led to where the game was a bit.
What it feels like, having watched it, funnily enough, and listening to what you said, is, I suppose this is a question, is that I think probably 18 months, 2 years ago, it felt like England was searching for a team, and now it feels like they've found a team and they're tweaking it and building it, and there are going to be setbacks and obviously big days but it feels like they've got the core, but more is needed from them. Is that a time thing, or would you disagree and say we're still searching for key individuals?
No, I don't think we're, we'll always still talk around the front row until Joe and Dan are put to pastures. But at the moment they're doing the job. But that's the only real place I see, where we need some strength coming through. And that's no slight against Joe Muller and Dan Cole, obviously, because they're still doing it to the level to get picked at. But you want people who are pushing them on. Obviously we've got Genji, he's injured, and then Sinks has got to, as he said on the pod, he's got to work his way back. But I think that we've got a great team. I really like it. I think, one thing that was slightly disappointing yesterday was I felt we went back to kicking the ball away quite a bit. Those little grubbers through, and when not necessarily it was on a couple of times off turnover, when you feel that if they'd have had a look up, there probably was a second row in front of the back, and you could probably have a go at taking him on. And we tried to grub it through, and a lot of those got blocked. But that is sometimes the nature of how a game goes, and it was a bit all over the place. It bounced around a lot. As I said, a lot of turnovers throughout that game. So no one really got comfortable in their attacking shape, and when they tried to, mistakes were made. So it looked like a team that hadn't played for a long time, but then a team that obviously has had 2 months off since the end of the season and had to try and pull it all back together. But I'm not particularly worried about it. I still think they need to focus on performances. I think if they looked at that performance yesterday, they could go, we could have played better. And if that had happened, I think they would have won the game, no doubt. But they'll also go take a lot of positivity from the fact that they've gone down to Dunedin and really been in the mix for a win. And as I say, if they can go to Auckland next week and take a victory there at Eden Park, then that will be ultimately very historic, as you said, for the first win in 30 years.
Yeah. Just quickly on, the headlines are all headlines everywhere in the sports pages about penalties yesterday. Well done, Gareth Southgate and his boys. But the headlines from this game, it sort of seems to be sort of tacked onto the back of Marcus Smith's missed pots at goal. Would you swap it next week and say, right, Henry Slade has done a great job for Exeter in that department. You take the goal kicking, Marcus, just concentrate on running the show for us. Or as a 10 and a general, do you have to have that element to feel empowered in your shirt?
Yeah, I don't know. I think for Marcus, obviously it was where they were. I mean, they were slap bang red zone kicks, and for some reason they weren't coming off his foot, and only he'll know why. But yeah, I think they could have possibly. It's a very hard thing to do, having been captain of Gloucester with Nicky Robinson, who's possibly the angriest 10 in the world, and having
that's on a night
Rob
out,
Cook and having Rob Cook at fullback, who is a great kicker, and you go and Nicky missing 2, and then as captain you go, Nicky, maybe Rob should kick, and getting an answer with a lot of expletives, basically telling me to do one, is a very hard thing to do, and unless you've sort of agreed it beforehand that if you miss 2 on the bounce you're out or something, it's a difficult thing to do. But I think that's got to somehow be taken out of their hands. So would I change it to have Slady next week? If he's kicking well in the week, then I've got no problems with who starts. It's anyone who misses sort of something in that red zone, and then you can have 1, but if you have 2, obviously. We missed 3, but they missed 3 as well.
I know. I was going to say,
Mackenzie missed 3.
Yeah.
So I ultimately don't think it lost us the game on the weekend this time. But does it relieve the pressure off a 10? I don't think it generally does. I think it's a thing that they want.
A couple of interesting bits. I thought it was very interesting. Mackenzie getting timed out and went into a press huddle afterwards, and they'd obviously won, so it was all laughing and joking. But if you compare that with the sort of what happened there with the treatment that Owen Farrell got, when he was timed out against Samoa in the World Cup final pool match, wasn't it? I mean, just sort of, it's another example of what it takes to stand in that firing line, I think, which is really interesting.
Yeah.
Joe Marler looks likely to miss the second test. I wonder, therefore, whether they'll start Bevan Rodd and whether Finn Baxter will come off the bench once again. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. I just want to read you this, though, from as we sum this up, from Stephen Jones. England now need to react. They must win next weekend. They must. History shows us it's almost certain that the All Blacks will be 15 points better off next week. So England need to be at least 3 scores better if they're to draw the series. The exuberant, drooling, matey over-optimism of some observers, whether they be players or observers, is one thing, but to be brutal, it has no place in international rugby. I sort of quite like the fact, I mean, he is the doyen of rugby writing. I quite like the fact he's turned up the heat a bit. Do you agree that next week, I mean, the next week is absolute must-win for England? It's not a sort of a knockout game of sorts, but it will put a flag in the sand for a new season that shows they have come from losing warm-up games at home to Fiji through to beating the All Blacks in New Zealand via a semi-final in a Rugby World Cup. Lose it, and it's a bit I don't think it's the be-all and end-all that he makes it out to be, but it's quite a nice narrative to set and put the pressure on. Again, I will always go back at the moment for this England team. It's all about the performance, and I think if they get the performance, they'll be in the mix at the end of it. I thought they were probably 5% off on the weekend, which is probably why they lost. But I have faith that if they can get it right, I just don't think they didn't sing like they have been. Their moves weren't quite as crisp as they were in the Six Nations, but that could just be a rusty thing of not playing for a month as well. So as much as people are saying New Zealand are going to be better, I think England will be better off that run out. I know they played against Japan, but it was a much sort of changed team a little bit. And I think they'll be better off the back of this. And I actually think they can get there and win. I hope they do. Oh man, what a positive note on which to end.
Well, we always got to try and keep it positive, because I think it gets negative far too quickly, far too easily. I don't think there were many negatives in that game. There was a couple of silly penalties and mistakes, but they happen in every game. Yeah. And at the end of it, they were still in the mix to take the win. But
they're never as good. You're never as good as they say you are. You're never as bad as they say you are. You're somewhere in between.
Very true.
Off to Silverstone. Enjoy. It's a busy life in Tindall Towers.
It's right. You look at yesterday, having a wedding yesterday, and then you had those 4 games of rugby. You had England playing football. Yeah. You've got a lockout of British drivers on the starting grid at Silverstone. Yeah. It was a good day. It was a good sporting day yesterday.
Just about here in your voice box. All right, Tins, we'll let you go. Reload, recuperate. It's been a big weekend. I know we will catch you off the back of the All Blacks second test in a week's time. Thank you to you, and we will move on to our Celtic debrief in the green corner. A very warm welcome to Shane Horgan, and in the red corner, a man who has not retired, semi-retired, let's say. He's moved house. He's had a baby in the last week, and I think also he's been on a stag do as well, which makes it a hell of a 7 days or so. A very warm welcome to the one of John Fox Davies. Of those, which has been the most important event?
Oh, the birth of my newborn son, not the stag do whatsoever.
Correct answer.
Yeah.
Good. Glad the media handbook still works extremely well.
That pause was a little too long, though, wasn't it? That's another thing.
Yeah. I think it's the delay from Cardiff. That's what it is. I was straight in there. It's the delay.
Well done. Many congratulations. I'm very glad to hear it's all going well. Shaggy is alongside as well. To Bruce, gents, off the back of yesterday, let's start with the world champions. I mean, it's called the Mike Tindall Derby because I think it's a race to see in which one he is least popular, Ireland or South Africa. But it is the Boks who does so much talk and spice coming into it. Gutted or Boks too good?
I'm not actually that gutted because the expectation was that South Africa really should win this game. Double world champions, Lions series. Undoubtedly number one in the world. Not quite sure where Ireland are in the world, even after the Six Nations. So I have to say, big expectations that South Africa would win at home. There was so much to sort of unpack in that game. It started off with South Africa playing a sort of wider rugby than we've seen. You could see the influence of Tony Brown. Ireland not playing as patterned as we would expect, and then actually both teams then having loads of unforced errors. Neither team played certainly anywhere near as well as they could. But by the time the sort of second half rolled around and things loosened up, we had a brilliant game, and it was very exciting. And it was definitely an opportunity for Ireland. They could have won, and we may come on to a couple of the bad decisions that I think they went against them. But they had an opportunity to win, and I think they have a opportunity to go well next week as well.
What did you make of it, Fox, and what you saw? Who stood out? What were the bits that you really enjoyed?
I think the way Ireland were playing, they were trying a few different things. Like Conor Murray's try at the end, that little bit where Kelleher came on the inside ball. You normally don't see that from a pod of forwards. And I just think like how Ireland have progressed over the last few years to become one of the best attacking teams, and just constantly trying to develop how they break up a game. And there was like 4 forwards going up the line, and there wasn't a back involved until there was a pass to Conor Murray for the scoring thing. That's what sets the best teams in the world apart from everyone else, is that ability to create with their forwards. Like the best teams they've upskilled the forwards to be able to do the jobs that's needed for like the backs do, really. So I was impressed with that. The intensity, obviously, from the South African defence, that regardless of just where it is, that right at the end, Jesse Creel coming in and making a spot blitz tackle on Ringrose, that was where you could have quite easily just sat off 80 metres from your try line. It's that commitment that they had. And, I think South Africa probably better for the hit out against Wales a couple of weeks ago. And, it sets it up, really nicely for next week, going into it to see what, where Ireland can improve and what else South Africa can bring with this new style of attack they want to do. So it was a great physical game, I have to say.
I think that try that you mentioned there, the setup for it, that's going to give a lot of hope to Ireland, and it's something that maybe when Ireland weren't set up, when they weren't patterned, when they didn't have that pod in place and they didn't have those options in animation, they often got, or they were often in single runners, or, a very obvious runner close to the ruck. And that is just manna from heaven for South Africa. They'll just eat you up. They'll knock you back. They'll turn you over. And actually, for the first try, Ireland weren't structured at all. And we were going backwards and backwards. Now, it was kind of counterintuitively, it was like it was something out of nothing, and Crowley threw a ball over the top, and Kelleher Sheehan did drop the ball off really well, and then Lowe produced a piece of magic. But you wouldn't be establishing your game plan on that. But what Ireland can do, as you can see, when they had those pods set and they had the options and they took the options, they looked a real threat. And in preparing for the game, I did the analysis of Ireland, New Zealand a couple of years ago, and that's when Ireland were at their best in that, through a full game. Now, they've done it in fits and starts, and it's coincided with their best performances, but there's a clear roadmap for Ireland on how they play their best rugby and have achieved their best performances, and that is a very patterned system with taking the options. And you're right, Foxy, that try, the Conor Murray try, to have 4 forwards running at the line like that, all being a threat as carriers, and then that little subtlety on the block off line. Alex, actually, you might remember this. That was a move using forwards and backs that Leinster did against Munster in the semi-final in Croke Park. It's a beautiful move because it stops the man coming off the ruck or line out. It blocks him off. It's a really sort of subtle move, but for forwards to be able to do that just shows the sort of expectations that coaches are putting on them and their ability to deliver. So, I think it's very clear what Ireland will need to do in order to beat the South Africans, and that's remained very structured. The South Africans showed us this other side of their game that I think is not only just a huge danger for Ireland, but like if South Africa start playing, a wider game, more ambitious, we all may go home because they have such amazingly talented players. They have a monster, pack. We know what their set piece is like. We know all the other components that have meant that they're double world champions and beating the Lions and everything else. They add on this Tony Brown layer of wide and ambitious play, and we could all be in a lot of trouble for a lot of years.
Just very quickly on the box. When you look at the international landscape at the moment, I suppose you look at that quarter-final weekend and you had 3 of the 4 games decided by the flick of a coin. Lots of teams are running similar patterns. Lots of teams are setting themselves up. It's all sort of marginal tweaks as to how they are performing, but on a fairly level playing field. How big an asset is what we saw from that bot pack and the extra ability for them to find a physical edge that it seems other teams can't match? Am I talking sort of in hyperbole here, or do they have a gear that other teams, when they find it, other teams really, really struggle to go and match?
Yeah, we've listen. It's as old as rugby. If you know, no scrum, no win. And listen, Ireland's scrum was really admirable all the way through. Yeah, all the way through the game until the last couple of scrums, and in the last one in particular, they were literally just blown off the ball. Poor old Kelleher was yellow carded from a 5-metre scrum that was driven like they ran backwards over the line for a penalty try. It's like, what's this guy meant to do? Like, he's not trying to do anything. He can't physically match these guys. So they always have that to rely on, and that's a real comfort. But listen, it's this extra layer that they can put on top of it. The other thing is, Pollard was picked, I think, probably, for a number of reasons. Listen, he's an excellent player, an all-rounder, but he's also, guaranteed points. But he wasn't guaranteed points, and I don't think, we'll ever see him sort of kick as badly again. But it just shows that, they've got potentially so many strings to their bows, but there was also sort of unforced errors. They did still look a bit rusty. I have to say the whole game, up until sort of the closing stages, looked a bit like one team was slightly undercooked and one team looked a little bit fatigued or overcooked, and that was the kind of the story of the game. But I can't leave it without sort of speaking about the most crucial point in the game, and it felt like the turning point, which was the James Lowe try that wasn't. There was the referee, the TMO played a fairly important role in this game. And I don't like the TMO anyway. I especially don't like them. I bringing back into phases of play. I think this whole idea is it should be a very, very visible. What's the language, Alex? Is it
clear and obvious?
Clear and obvious. I think it has to be super clear and obvious, and that's why I have no issue with the other decisions that the TMO made. I don't think they should be pulling. Going back to the line out for James Lowe, potentially in or out of touch, no problem. That was great play for me for South Africa. I think that the original call on the try for Caelan Doris was a no call, and that a grand. That's fine. Let's not go back where we don't need to go back. I wouldn't even be referring those. But this, I think, seemed incredibly harsh as well. I think there was a penalty from South Africa at that ruck. And then, Kelleher's penalised for hooking the ball back while he's on the ground. I don't think we should be going back for that anyway. And I think that looked to me like a rugby incident. That ball can come back, whether it was intentional or not, whether he was fully on the ground or not, is hard to tell. And, I would have just allowed that try to happen. And I thought, Lowe did so well for it, and it had the game positioned in a phenomenal, as a phenomenal conclusion. And we just lost a bit something for a TMO inserting themselves where they didn't need to be.
I think the reason that they do it, though, is that in the world of online internet analysts, the ability to tell everyone they've done it wrong and for online pile-ons to be a thing means that they are trying to be as tidy as possible in the moment, but it's almost too tight. Rugby is an imperfect game from start to finish.
So imperfect.
It is a game which is all about seeing how much you can get away with, how far you can push the laws, how much you can kind of bend it to your will. And that's why Richie McCaw will always be the greatest, because he was the best at that particular aspect of it. So trying to find perfection in the game of chaos, I think, is a futile exercise.
And it's almost like this, like a saving grace for the referee. If they did miss something, then it allows them just not to, for, like you said, that online refereeing coaches, not to go, this was done wrong, or we were robbed, or whatever. It's like that safety net. But like you said, a rugby incident, and it's taken away some beautiful scenes of rugby. And that's the thing that's frustrating, I think, for the viewer.
Can I ask you one more question on South Africa, Ireland, Shane? And it is Ireland specific. It's a sort of where is Ireland question. But I thought Andy Farrell he's very, very gracious in games where he doesn't get the rub of the green, and he said we'll go through the proper channels. Yesterday, he was very good off the back of the last gasp loss to England in the Six Nations as well. But with all the talk of these two teams coming in, who's best in the world, who's not, Box obviously go one up, there is still another chapter to come. But if you look at Ireland and the World Cup quarter-final exit and the last gasp loss to England when everyone said they were home and hosed before kickoff, and what's happening to Leinster in the latter stages of big tournaments at the moment, does yesterday's result calm these conversations of Ireland are the best in the world? And is that a good thing or a bad thing? Or have you got deeper concerns as to where Irish rugby, I suppose not where it is, but how it is performing at the sharpest end when it really, really, really matters?
Well, listen, I don't think anyone serious is talking about Ireland as the best team in the world, or maybe even, I don't think it's a valid conversation, even the second best team in the world, to be honest with you, given where they were in the World Cup and the fact that they got beaten by England as well. So, I just don't take that seriously. There are concerns about Ireland. Now, I have to say I was quite buoyed by the performance in many ways. Maybe my expectations after what happened to Irish teams at the end of the domestic and European season maybe dropped the bar for me a bit. And also remember that, listen, Ireland weren't brilliant, and that's it. I know they're Six Nations champions, but they weren't brilliant. Aside from that performance against France, you got to think it was kind of a lot of mediocre performances against a very mediocre Six Nations this year. Now, they got out and they were champions, and that was brilliant. But I don't think anybody thought, listen, this is Ireland of a few years ago. But I think we can tweak what we're doing and refresh and innovate. And I think we have to do that because it was the differential between us and other teams over the last 4 years. And we have to find that again. We have to put some distance between what we're doing and every other team is doing. Because if we're basing ourselves on depth of squad or potential sort of, physicality or, the different elements that New Zealand or South Africa or England sort of bring to their side, then, it's more difficult to beat them. If we're doing something else and we're doing something that's very Irish, then I think we've a better chance to compete with those bigger, more well-funded, deeper pool of players unions.
I reckon one or two will raise an eyebrow to that. I reckon Irish rugby, I reckon you've got a pretty good depth of talent to pick from. I'm not sure it's woe is me just yet. Can we stay with this, Shane? Because I want to ask you about Joe Schmidt and Australia, obviously having played on him for so many years at Leinster. But, Fox, give us a debrief on Wales. It feels quite tough going at the moment. What did you see? What did you like? What gave you real concerns?
It was a tough one to watch yesterday. I felt it, the basics, I think 19 turnovers, and in test match rugby, you can't handle any team, that the ball like that. And, I think Australia at times looked really good and caused us problems. But yeah, discipline, errors, turnovers, these things you can't have. And, I know it was a young team, inexperienced. Gat said, that this is where we're at the moment, but it's the fundamental basics that cost us. I think, talent-wise, we have not that much strength and depth, but like when we get a good team out, I think we can compete against, the likes of Australia. But no, the fact that, we struggle to take any pressure from any visits from the 22, that was concerning. Our driving line was quite good. I thought Aaron Wainwright was fantastic again. I think he is the shining light at the moment. I think we're looking at him to create things from nothing to get us momentum. And so yeah, not frustrating. It was a case of that. We were trying to physically go at Australia, but they had some big men and they were winning collisions, and it's trying to have a bit of patience, give boys time in the middle, but you can't turn the ball over that much, or give silly penalties, easy ins for teams and on test match level rugby, and that's the killer really. That's the frustrating part, because Wales can't seem to build their game at the moment. So yeah, it'll be a tough day, and I think what you got to see is that increase in the basic skill level.
If you compare the situation Wales find themselves in relative to Ireland, Ireland's pyramid is pretty well set now, from grassroots up to sort of provincial up to Ireland. There isn't, and it doesn't appear to be, and this is not breaking news to anybody in Wales, there doesn't appear to be massively solid foundations for anything to grow up into the national level. So it sort of feels like Gatland is trying to do the very best with what he can find. You're talking about time as the solution. Is that sort of genuinely going to get Wales back to where they need to get to? Are there other easy fixes? What is the route back to a really competitive Welsh team?
I think they're trying to simplify the game. They're picking Grady at 12 to try and get some gain line, and there were opportunities on the weekend where the boys would hit the middle, whether that be Wainwright or Grady, and then the boys would try to take the edge out wide with our back three, and we coughed up the ball a couple of times, and I think we're getting momentum like that, but it's that consistency of retaining the ball, building pressure, imposing your game plan on the opposition, not allowing them to dictate it with, coming off the line, slowing the ball down, But I think, I say time. I don't know. It's really tough at the moment. Like you said, Welsh rugby is in a bit of a pickle. It's our lowest ranked. We're ranked 11th, the lowest we've been for a number of years, and I do think time is the only way we're going to get better as a team.
What do you see in Wales, Shane?
I see a difficult road, I have to say, because of not necessarily even because of GATS or the current crop, but there has been sort of a systematic failure to enforce the right structures in Wales for a long period now, and that means they just don't have the pipeline of top players coming through, and there does seem to be, it's quite this almost sort of depressive around the regions at the moment. It's not like there doesn't seem the sort of energy and excitement, enthusiasm around it, and maybe if we're really honest, that's been there for quite a while, but it was hidden behind a couple of generations of just remarkable players with coaches that developed this idea of a team Wales, and that was the massive focus, and that covered a lot of the issues, and that can happen. You can have, and listen, Wales historically have had these generations of phenomenal players, but if you look at also, they've had a couple of generations, maybe between the 70s and the 2000s, where they had a fallow period, and just the waiting for a massive generation to just stick up their hand is high risk, and until, and I know they're addressing some of those issues at the moment, but that's not necessarily sort of a short term plan. So that kind of thing is concerning. I suppose what they need to rely on is maybe a smaller group of top players, right? All the energy behind them, finding the system and the type of play and the teammanship that has worked for Wales before, and hope that those sort of longer term, I would say, fundamental issues around player development can be addressed slightly quicker. I think that's it, but I don't. It's challenging. It is challenging.
Yeah, they've put the union have put a review in now, and they said they're going to put it in place in October, and it'd be interesting to see. I think we can do more for our youngsters in the academy. I think when I first came through, the system that we had worked well. It was more of an individual basis, trying to bring in 3 or 4 very good youngsters instead of a crop of 9 or 10 good youngsters. And I think we need to make sure that we rely on the quality of coaching and that we give these boys in the academy. I don't think that we're giving them the proper pathway to understand how difficult high level rugby is and what's required of you. I think education for these boys isn't quite there. And we can do so much better. We can get so much gains from little fixes in that way. Obviously, financially, the regions don't have the money to invest in big signings or whatever. So we have to rely on the talent that we can produce, but we have to produce that talent the best way we can, not just hoping that we get through. We have to put a system in place to rely on developing the best youngsters that we have, not thinking it's more luck and judgment. And like Shaggy said, like, we were lucky we had a generation that probably papered over the cracks that regional rugby's had for a number of years, unfortunately.
It's 8 losses in a row now for Wales, still chasing a first win in Australia since 1969. And I know obviously there were lots of discussion points around the Wallabies coming to this. I'm not sure one win a comeback makes, but it was very energetic, wasn't it? I mean, it was a big crowd. It was a big win. There was some great individual performances. 7 debuts as well for Joe Schmidt. What did you see? And I think all fans in this part of the world will keep a keen eye on Australia for the next 12 months or so, given what's happening next summer. What did you see as the Joe Schmidt Wallabies pulled out of the garage? What did you like, Shane?
I liked that it felt like a real reset and sort of a leaving the last couple of years sort of behind, which was necessary. I think Joe Schmidt has brought an optimism to them. I like what they did with Hooper, given how he was dealt with, pre-World Cup. I think that those sort of things matter, and they count. They matter to fans. They matter to squads as well. So very sort of emotionally intelligent by Joe Schmidt, which I think is something that he will bring to the role. I also felt like, is this the Joe Schmidt that we saw in Claremont and that we had in the first few years of Leinster? Because if it is, this is going to be very exciting, innovative, progressive time for Australian rugby. And listen, I know we've all critiqued Joe based on the last couple of years with Ireland, which I felt, I've said this many times before, I felt players were intimidated and inhibited by his structures. But I've always said to you guys, my experience of Joe is a coach that is so forward thinking, that wants you to express yourself, that wants you to play rugby. And I think that was what we saw with those Claremont teams and those first years in Leinster as well. So if they've got that iteration of Joe Schmidt, the Wallabies are really in good stead. And they were creative, and they did, we saw lots of different types of kicks. We saw, great back three play, which is something that, is a hallmark of what Joe's done. And my personal experience is him, giving you really free rein to go after things when the ball is kicked to you. So that side of stuff was great. I think the other side of things, we saw that Joe Schmidt's sort of attention to detail. So, 100% at scrum and line out is kind of the basis that you have to have for any international team, or as close to that as possible.
I liked how Australia just dictated their foot speed in the line in their attack. They weren't getting, they had time with the ball. I think Joe was, like you said, attention to detail, their ability to do it. They weren't rushing their passes. They seemed to be always dictating to Wales the speed of the line speed, or putting Wales on the back foot and being able to have time to put the right passes in. So I thought that time at the line was impressive for a first hit out as a group. They're very talented with ball in hand, but I thought that was a big improvement where I just felt that they had control in how they wanted to attack.
Tins and I did something with Michael Liner a couple of weeks ago with Black Eye, and his son, obviously, and many congratulations to Tom, made his Australian debut, but he said the word in the camp is that it had gone up massively as just an environment. They're being treated as grown-ups. It's a really tight, sort of inward-looking group, as opposed to all wondering whether they're going to be here tomorrow and what the latest sort of headline is going to be. And with that in mind, I think it's obviously a hell of a forge that they have to go through. All Blacks, South Africa in the Rugby Championship. It's going to be a big autumn for them. What sort of a Wallabies do we think we might be facing as Lions fans in 12 months' time? Just a quick snapshot.
Well, undoubtedly a better one, but that bar is pretty low, isn't it? So, and we kind of need it. And the Lions, I think this is one of the times where you think about sort of rugby more broadly than just, your own team or your own country, or indeed the Lions. we need that to be a competitive series. We need it to be fun. Like it's part of it as well. I still think it's, they're coming from a very low base. They do have some time to rectify things. They share problems with player development. We know that, but we also know, similar to Wales, that they produce talented, really sort of talented, exceptional individuals. I think if Joe Schmidt can create, and Alex, that's really kind of interesting feedback from Tom. If they can create an environment where this group of players can perform at their best, because that environment hasn't been there for the last couple of years. Couple that with the Joe Schmidt of that first period in Claremont or Leinster, or indeed Ireland, then they fix those sort of core issues around set pieces. Then you've got a fighting chance at home. And that's what we want. Now, I don't want them too good, but I certainly want a fighting chance, and we want a competitive series. And I think, again, if anyone's going to be able to get Australia to that, I think it's Joe Schmidt. I think they're a really good fit for each other.
I think the fact that they're going to be encouraged, the environment they have. If you're going into work and someone's there trying to get the best out of you instead of trying to intimidate you, you're going to turn up to that guy and you're going to try and make yourself better day in, day out. And, they've got 12 months now to really set foundations. The Rugby Championship is going to be extremely tough, but like Shaggy said, they produce talent, and, I'm sure Joe can hold that in and get them to a place where, we want to see a competitive series in 12 months' time. And, it's an exciting prospect for them to see where they can go. And it's, I'm definitely intrigued to see how they perform over the coming months.
Fantastic. Win, lose or draw Wales in the second test next weekend?
Yeah.
I think the look away from camera says it all.
Yeah. I think it's like I said, we're in a tough spot at the moment, and I just see Australia just getting better and better, and, unless we cut out the fundamental errors that we had, we're not going to be getting a victory next week, I don't think, unfortunately.
Right. Win, lose or draw, Shane. Second test, South Africa, Ireland.
I think we've got a shot. My expectation was that we could have been under a bit of pressure yesterday. I thought it could have been a big score, and it might have been at various points. But this Irish team, more than any Irish team, has an ability to hang in games and give themselves a chance of succeeding. And they did that. Despite long periods of dominance for South Africa in the first and start of the second half, but for the call we discussed, I think, Ireland could very well have won that game. That was also, I was buoyed by the last 10 minutes at altitude as well, with their bomb squad on. Now, aside from being destroyed in that last scrum, but everything else, they were holding their own, and they were going toe to toe. It was a real slug out. So I'm more confident than I was this time last week. Would it be a surprise if Ireland wins? I think it would be a surprise, but I wouldn't be shocked.
Right. So sorry, we've gone round and round about 3 or 4 times.
I'm going to go for a win. I'm actually going to go for a win. I'm going to go for a win.
Good on
it would
you.
be, and it would be it would be an outstanding performance if they do it. But they get their pattern right, and I think they've been shown a way to do it. Listen, why wouldn't they?
Brilliant. It is going to be a mega second weekend. Of course, worth marking your card if you didn't see that France got past Argentina in Mendoza, 28-13. Baptiste Serra with the pick of the tries there. And well done to Scotland, who put on a 73-12 win over Canada with 10 debutants, 11 tries. And certainly Gregor Townsend strengthening his depth, I would imagine, in that one. I haven't seen too much of it, but well done to the Scots there. Thank you, chaps. Fox, Shaggy, lovely to see you both. We'll check in again next week. Enjoy your weeks in the meantime. We've been the Good, the Bad, and the Rugby with our friends at Continental Tires. Enjoy your week. Bye for now.